Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the virtual breakfast sessions. I'm Larry Sashin, and today we put together a great group of guys to discuss, are the private clubs finally feeling the pinch? But before we do that, let's thank the guy who's paying today's bills, Ed Flanagan and the Era Group. Listen, I don't know how many years we've been talking about this. If your company is spending $100,000 or more on any of the verticals they work on, listen, let Ed Flanagan and the Era Group sift through your invoices, your contracts. Let them make sure that you're getting exactly what you paid for. And if you happen to be paying too much for that, they will help you renegotiate your contract or get another vendor. So, Ed Flanagan, the ERA Group, and back to our show. Um, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves before we start talking. Charles, why don't you start?
Good morning. Charles Dorn, Managing Director of the Dorn Group. We have a consulting firm that specializes in the private club industry, operational consulting, strategic planning, and executive search, and also longtime educator as a 20-year member of the faculty at the hospitality program at NYU.
Okay, thank you. And Stephen.
Hey guys, how are you? I am Chef Stephen Yen. I've been an executive chef in New York City in the area for over 16 years, the last 5 being in private clubs. Currently at the Core Club, which is at 711 Fifth Avenue, the historically old Coca-Cola building, and before that, Liberty National Golf Club in Jersey City.
Okay, and Guy.
Guy Salish with Vision Financial Strategist. We are a fractional CFO, COO company that bridges the gap between the art of the business and the business for food and beverage and retail businesses.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you all. Back to the show. A year ago, we did a show basically similar to this. And at that time, clubs were still rolling along the way they did in years previous. But it seems that that what used to be considered an amenity, the food and beverage division, is now a line item in the balance sheet. Stephen, you and I were talking about this the other day, and I know you have a few things to say.
Sure. So, I think, especially right now in New York City, private clubs is becoming the new Starbucks. It's oversaturated. You have Casa Cipriani, Zero Bond, ZZ, Core Club, Harmony, Union, Yale, like you name it. It is, I feel like it's become the WeWork, if you will. Every block has a new private club. Every single person who has the financial and monetary, means to join one has joined one, if not many. Fly Fish Club, and there's more clubs than we've ever seen before in New York City. Is there a bubble that's about to burst? Potentially, but I really would say the focus of the business model itself has changed drastically. Before, like you said, food and beverage has been looked at as an amenity, mostly subsidized by the membership dues. But now, because there's so many clubs, a lot of these membership clubs are actually lowering their dues to increase foot traffic, if you will. And so then you need to get your cash flows from somewhere, right? So does that turn into you're going to have a cocktail night every single night, not just a happy hour? I think the hardest job right now is the curation of activities and different activations at the club. How do you really bring your members back every single night, or at least 3 times a week? How do you entertain them? How do you dine them? How do you wine and dine them? And what's keeping them from joining another club, or what's keeping them from going to the hottest new restaurant in New York City? What's keeping them from hiring a private chef? So it's not enough to just have incredible food and great wine selections. You really, really, really need to bring in some, favorite authors to maybe do a little bit of a book signing and a talk, or you need to bring in some controversial politicians to have a debate. You might need to bring in, I don't think you can just hire a jazz band anymore. That is long gone. That's like the norm, if you will. Um, And at the same time, coming from the food and beverage standpoint, we're always asked to jump through hoops. But now it's like, okay, now that you can jump through a hoop, can you do a backflip? Now that we know you can do a backflip, can you juggle these while they're on fire, right? It's like, how much more can you do while at the same time minimum wage is going up, food cost is going up. You saw the news about pasta, 107% tariffs. I think pasta as a New Yorker, pasta is in my diet at least 5 times a week. Does that mean we're all going to pivot? Does that mean we're going to have more local pasta suppliers pick up the slack? Does that mean we're going to have more restaurants and clubs making their own pasta in scratch, from scratch in house? But to be honest with you, I like dried pasta because I like my pasta a little bit al dente. You don't get that with fresh pasta. So, I argue with a lot of other chefs all the time that fresh pasta is not always the best, and then you have your time value. If you are extruding your own pasta and you do want to dry it out in house, that's at least 18 to 36 hours of pasta just sitting there underneath a fan, right? In New York City, we don't have room for this. We don't have storage. We don't have time. We don't have, time is money. So I think becoming or being a chef in New York City or even being in the F&B department of any club in New York City is you need to learn more magic spells and potions. I always refer to ourselves as like magicians. It's all smoke and mirrors, but now the curtain has been drawn back and everyone sees everything because everything's transparent. We're really been asked to, really come up with some stuff that hasn't been done before because everyone's seen everything. The exposure with social media, you can't just simply do a wine dinner. It doesn't mean anything to anyone anymore.
Okay. So, Guy, you just been traveling all over the country seeing people. What's going on that you could add to this?
Well, I think first off, there's needs to be a distinction in the conversation between city clubs and rural clubs. I'm just outside Philadelphia on the main line, which you could probably say is country club central in the world. There are more country clubs within a stone's throw here than you can possibly imagine. The challenges we see in going into clubs, we just did a big analysis for a major club down here to try and figure out why they were losing upward of $600,000 a year in the food and beverage department alone. And interestingly, we're finding that the country club aspect has a disparity, a challenge they need to face, which is legacy members versus younger members, because they both want different things, different menus with different flavor profiles, and they also don't want to dine in the same room. And many older adults don't want to sit in the dining room and pay country club prices or with the prices they should be paying and have kids running around. So clubs need to diversify their bases, and they need to really get back to the fundamentals. Country clubs grew on their own through attrition inside the club. And we find that they aren't really aware of what's happening in the food and beverage world outside of their clubs. They aren't aware of what's happening in the restaurants. They aren't aware of the new beverage programs that are going on with the non-alcoholic beverage programs that entice younger drinkers. But you need to marry these together to make it effective. And you really do need to have a strong foundation. It can no longer be managing by gut. I know that 12 steaks come out of the strip point, therefore we're dividing by 12. You really need to be creative in the way you manage your product and your assets. That includes your labor. You can't have, there's one club we're dealing with right now that keeps 6 people on the floor, but they pay a flat wage of $18 an hour for the waiters. And it isn't like a restaurant where you pay a federal minimum of $285 and you can keep the labor on the floor. You really need to manage differently today. And that's from all aspects, not just the food and beverage, not just the menu, it's all aspects from the foundation of how you built your menu and pricing, to your labor cost profile and scheduling, to your sales pattern and the training. And I think clubs outside of the city clubs are a different breed of club. I think outside the city, these clubs need to really start to look around the surroundings and understand what's happening in the marketplace and figure out how to bridge the gap between the two types of the legacy customer or member and non-legacy members. Down here, membership dues have skyrocketed to join clubs, and there's a waiting line to get into many of the clubs. But it's the same constant complaint you hear from the members that the food and beverage program doesn't meet the standards of what I can get outside. So why would I pay the prices here when I can go outside and get a better meal? So I think the club industry has a lot of homework to do, and we need to get away from, we sort of hired and promote people from within. But what happens then is no fresh blood, no fresh ideas. It's just a continuation of what we've always done and expect a different result.
Okay, so Charles, there's been a tidal wave of problems all of a sudden there. What are you suggesting to clubs to help fix these things?
Well, let me start by building on what both Stephen and Guy said. I think Guy's point a moment ago that we have to differentiate between clubs, styles of clubs, locations of clubs is a really valid one. City clubs, as Stephen mentioned, have really undergone an incredible metamorphosis in recent years, probably post-pandemic. And Stephen's point about the number of new clubs just had me kind of chuckling because I can't keep up with them. But I do think there's a differentiation between traditional clubs and a lot of the clubs that Stephen mentioned. The traditional clubs are some of the clubs that Guy mentioned that are dealing with some of their problems. The new clubs often don't have the heritage and they're trying to be one-upsmanship on the next club. And as Stephen said,
right.
People join, they don't like it for whatever reason, they join another one. The fact they have to write a check for $200,000, they don't care. That right. It's not an issue. Is New York City overbuilt in clubs at the moment? Absolutely. Stephen's 100% right. I think that some of those guys are going to just go away and disappear because at the end of the day, what are they for the most part? Stephen's club aside, they're luncheon or dinner clubs. That's all they are. They don't have athletic facilities. They may have a great bar program, but the group of people that join them are often the people that, in fact, want the newest, the best, the hottest, the trendiest. And again, at some point, that club will not be the hottest, newest, or trendiest. They're going to move on to something new. So that's one group of clubs. The older, more traditional clubs in New York City are fundamentally doing well for a lot of different reasons, some of which is because they have guest bedrooms. And guest bedrooms pay for a lot of evils. And they cover the, Guy mentions being in the Philadelphia area. All you have to do is look at the Union League Club of Philly and see what they've done, and you can see how you can be successful. The bad thing is that a lot of these clubs, city and country club, have taken on tremendous amounts of debt since the pandemic. As Guy mentioned, tremendous percentage of clubs that now have a waiting list. And the bad decisions at the board are exactly that. They're bad decisions. The newest group of members want something new. Let's build it. Suddenly the club that had $3, $4, maybe $5 million worth of debt has $20 million worth of debt. In no other business would we quadruple the amount of debt. And so, kind of to what Guy said, I think that what I recommend to clients is we need to go back and look at everything we do. Clubs evolve, and often when you talk about food and beverage, they evolve really badly or poorly. There's a concept I use with my clients called club creep, where we literally offer a service or an amenity, and the next thing you know, the amenity has blossomed into 6 times what it once originally was. We've lost the purpose of the amenity and the economics. When you sit down and look at them, immediately should make you shake your head. And so what happened in 2008 when the market crashed was that every club did exactly that. Every business did exactly, not just clubs, of course. And they realized that some of these amenities, these programs that we did, a club that, for example, traditionally did free hors d'oeuvres in the bar before dinner 5 nights a week, suddenly woke up and said, oh my goodness, that's costing us X. Well, X is not just an expense, but it also eliminates the opportunity cost, where all of a sudden members are coming in, they're eating the U12 shrimp and the pigs in a blanket and other great hors d'oeuvres. And what are they doing? They're not ordering an appetizer. They're not ordering entrees, or they're splitting entrees and they're not ordering desserts. So 2008 rolled around. We did it out of necessity. We are back fat and happy right now. And the bottom line is The bottom is going to fall out. It's just a matter of when. We will have, we all know it. We have an economy right now that is sitting on a deck of cards. At some point, that deck of cards is going to fold. None of us know how bad it will be. There was a PwC study that came out in September talking about the economy, and especially in the food and beverage industry. And they were talking already about people's doubts about what's going on for the fall season. There is no question that people are concerned about money. At a certain point, they're going to keep cutting back, and clubs are going to wake up and they're going to have a very difficult nut that they've got to pay. They're not going to have revenue. I was with a club manager yesterday, as a matter of fact, who said to me, a hotel manager, I'm sorry, who was just sitting there talking about the last quarter of this year and the beginning of the first quarter of next year, scratching his head with other general managers about why business is off. And so the bottom line is, you got to get ahead of it. It was a very long answer, Larry, but you got to get ahead of the problem rather than wait until that house of cards falls down. Start looking at expenses. A guy mentioned payroll. I have a client out on Long Island that wants to run, it's a great club. They want to run 100% scratch kitchen. They didn't understand why their costs were through the roof. I sat with the board 2 weeks ago and I said to them, hey guys, you want to offer literally 21 appetizer choices, 25 entree choices? It doesn't take very long to figure out why you're losing a ton of money in food and beverage. They couldn't figure it out, but they wrote me a large check and I figured it out.
Okay. Listen, before we go to Fred, Charles just said something about they're looking to make it work without with magic. Stephen, you're the guy that's got to create the magic to keep everything level. Nobody wants to see a decrease on what's coming to the members, and that falls on your lap.
Mhm.
How do you do something like that?
So the easiest way to do this is what I call value-added products. When you're talking about the broadliners, Cisco, US Foods, Chef's Warehouse, Dairyland, like even Thomas Keller sells a stock now. He sells his own demi-glace. So this is something where, again, time is money. Instead of doing a 12-hour overnight demi, you can purchase it. Yes, you're paying for them to do it, but you're still going to save, let's say $1 an ounce. You still will see some savings. Same thing. You might see a product that is a byproduct. So there is Hatfield pork. They take their bone-in loins and they smoke them. It's something that it was a byproduct that they were selling the hams. They had these loins with the bone, threw them in the smoker. It's one of the most delicious things I've ever tried in my life. And because it's a byproduct from them, they're charging maybe $2.50 a pound, which is unbelievable. It's like almost the price of chicken right now. And now you have about a 40-pound loin bone in that you can create into double chops. You can create it into a carving station. You can do a lot of things with it, but it costs you barely anything to bring it in the house, and it's ready to go, ready to eat. All you got to do is retherm, throw it in the combi, and then you can make an apple chutney. You can do the sky's the limit on those. So those value added products. Same thing with French fries. French fries, everyone was cutting them by hand before. And Danielle Balloud, he got the standing water violation from the Department of Health. So as soon as he started buying fries, everyone else in New York City said, if Danielle can buy French fries, I can buy French fries. So to me, a value added is something like a frozen French fry that is delicious. That is, you will not get a standing water violation, from the DOH. You can buy one case at a time. You can buy 3 cases. Your volume discounts from like Lamb Wesson and those guys will come in handy. It's nice at the end of the quarter to get a check back, a little rebate. So those items, and it could be also it could be a sauce that you get, and then maybe you add your own touches to it. You reinforce the mirepoix. You add some fresh herbs. You are now buying your fish portioned because you can't afford to have a butcher on, on your payroll anymore. You're buying your meat portioned, and now because of more. Well, the great thing about meat companies is they're all, they have an in-house inspector no matter what. So getting a cryovac steak, There's nothing wrong with that. You know, if anything, it's going to get better. It's going to wet age, if you will. Um, Fish, a little more dangerous, but still, if you're buying portions from a great seafood supplier, nothing wrong with that. You're getting, because especially now, people wanting like a bronzino, instead of butterflying it from the belly up, you want you want to butterfly it from the backbone down, just to make it look a little different. And you have to reinvent the wheel. But at the same time, if I can get, let's say I get a pesto sauce made from Baldor, and then I put in some breadcrumbs, some red chilies, you know, I turn it into a gremolata, some lemon zest, take that same bronzino that I bought that was portioned, and then I put that gremolata on top, make a little herb oil with all of my byproduct, you know, the chive ends and the parsley ends that I didn't need anyway. I have a dish that I could then sell for like $38, you know, at least, or a bronzino for two. So those value added products is what every single chef and every single operator is pretty much geared towards right now. Scratch cooking is obviously the best, but what really is going on right now too is the labor pool, the talent pool. You can want a scratch kitchen, but you're not going to get these cooks that even know what they're doing. So at the end of the day,
Right.
you're spending more time in the kitchen babysitting them, watching stocks, watching the knife cuts, watching, you know, everything to, hey, did you wash your hands when you came out of the bathroom? So that's going to, you know, add it. It's just more stress on top of the chef, on top of, you know, their day to day. So those value added products is that gap that you see that has really been closed by like Performance Food Group and US Foods and Cisco and all these guys, because they're using large, you know, like for instance, one of the guys who's selling stocks and sauces and demis is based in Ohio. They're right across the street from a slaughterhouse. So those bones don't even, there's no carbon footprint. They're literally coming across the street, right in there, make their stocks, and then they freeze them immediately. It's, you know, it's an IQF product, and then it gets shipped out to wherever you are in the world. So they're really staying ahead of the game, and they're helping chefs like me with their value added.
Okay.
You know,
Go ahead.
Steve has a point here. The culinary field has changed. When I was cooking for a living, in Waldorf and many places in the city, um, as a chef, we drove what we wanted to put out there. We taught people about food. Today, people know more about food than we know most of the time because there's so much information out there. Buying steaks pre-portioned, you can control how they cut the steak and what kind of moisture is in there. You can test for flavor. You can get efficiencies by buying pre-cut onions, pre-diced potatoes. You need to look as a chef at what you're producing and what is important to you. You can still have the items and put your own signature on it by making certain items very special, like having 3 or 4 items on a menu that are really chef curated with scratch items. But the bulk of the menu, you need to design efficiencies into that menu that save both on inventory costs and on labor costs. And part of that is buying pre-prepared or partially prepared prepared foods, cut steaks, diced vegetables, diced onions. Why would you pay somebody to peel onions and dice them to use when you can buy them the exact way you want them? There's just so much efficiencies that need to be garnered, and we need as culinary people, we need to put in no blatant words, we need to put our ego aside here and say what's important to me that I can put my reputation and my spin on something and focus on that. Meanwhile, the operation is efficiently running because you can't focus on everything. And a scratch kitchen today, in today's cost and today's labor market, few and far between unless you're really subsidized. If management's really willing to say, we'll run the food and beverage department at break even or a loss, which I don't know of many businesses that are willing to do that today. So we really need to think this through. You really need to get the right team around you. You need to get the right people in the right seats in the bus, and you need to put your ego aside and understand where your strengths are and where your strengths aren't, and bring in people to help you figure it out.
So a question. That's great in May and June when you're running an a la carte kitchen. What happens now when you're going into holiday season and you have all this catering and party demand on top of your a la carte business? How do you balance it? Go ahead.
Look, when I was at Rainbow Room, we reduced the food cost by 5 points without increasing menu pricing and without changing portion sizes. What I did was an analysis of sales, and we figured out that on May 5th, the first order in was to tenderloin. So you try to sell tenderloin to each party because you always do a buffer prepare for more people than are coming. By the time you get to the fifth party, they're having tenderloin. Basically, that cup's already paid for, and they're paying for it again. You really need to look at the operation and do a study of the entire mechanics of your operation to figure out where there's room for efficiency. Catering during the holiday season, most parties you're going to do can be off pre-structured menus, and nothing should be sold without being analyzed anyway. Nothing should ever hit a menu unless you've really gone through the yield test, the cutting, the cooking test, the plate presentation, writing a spec for the item so that when you say you want a 6 ounce chicken breast, it's a 6 ounce chicken breast, not 2 3 ounces put together because that's what they had. You don't want 140 lemons when your menu costs for 165 lemons. You need to tighten the ship down. You need to do the homework and put a structure in. And we need to get away from our egos and realize this is a business and there isn't a lot of wiggle room in there. Your profitability is in the details and how well you manage the menu and how well you manage your details, both of labor and operations and menu.
Hey, Fred, so we keep talking about labor. Something near and dear to you. What do
Me
you
too.
think about labor?
Well, is the question for me, Larry?
Yes.
Well, I think it's part of Guy's equation. It's labor plus food plus energy costs plus, it's all part of that same formula. I guess my question to Guy would be, and to Charles would be, so outside of, or in addition to bringing in an outside expert like you guys, is there software out there that people should be looking at that can manage this type of model?
The problem with software is that many operations don't have a strong, solid foundation to begin with. The recipes aren't completely costed. Yield tests aren't done. There's a lot of estimation and gut going on. If you put software in on top of a weak foundation, the output's going to force you into jousting windmills. You've got to get the foundation right. You can't build a building on a weak foundation. And too many restaurants today, when we do restaurant accounting and restaurant consulting, we find that many restaurants today are built on very weak foundations, and they wonder why they're bleeding.
So who points that out, Charles?
I think that guys used the word many times in this conversation, that there are a lot of chefs out there. Stephen is not one of them. I know this as a fact, that don't recognize that they're running a multi-million-dollar business. And no different than we would do in any other business, we need to look at our businesses. And so, Stephen mentioned some great things. And Guy mentioned some great things. The idea of leaving your ego behind is a perfect one. I absolutely recognize that some chefs want to cut their own fish. But the reality is, cutting a fish today it's still and always has been an art form. And we've all seen people that do it. They do it really quickly. Okay, you are better off having that fish filleted and then giving you the fish bodies, which you then can do other things with, making a fume, whatever. But then you can actually see your fish bodies, etc., in case there was any doubt about it. But it's a heck of a lot easier and quicker and cheaper to do that than to try to train somebody. Because to Fred's point, and the question you asked Larry, is labor a bear? It's not going to change. Okay.
That's
and
right.
We have to take best use of what we have and the resources we have. But if you're taking, and Guy mentioned the client that he did work with, if you're starting from a bad foundation, if you're starting doing the same things that you've always done and you're just trying to tweak them, it's not going to work. And Stephen knows this from my experiences with him. I don't hire chefs for my clients that only have club experience. And I know some of my club friends would get really offended by me saying that. I want people like Stephen that have worked in commercial establishments and volume establishments who know how to manage a kitchen. And to Fred, to your question that related to the season, I am mind boggled when I go into clients and I look and no one's looked at cross utilization of product. And I look at inventory and I sit there and I go, why the heck do you have a case of this item that came in from fill in the blank, France, Italy, Spain, that cost you $700 and you're using it over the course of 9 or 10 months instead of potentially, cross-utilizing the product, using it in a month or two? You've not only tied up dollars, but the quality of the product offered suffers because it's sitting there that long. But you know what? Can you eliminate that product? Is there an alternative? I mean, you're bringing in, how many kitchens genuinely need, multiple types of anchovies? How many kitchen needs, 3 different types of balsamic glaze? I mean, first of all, should probably be making yourself. But if I walk into your storeroom, Stephen mentioned pasta. I have a client right now that has a wall of pasta bigger than what I saw in Italy. And I looked at the chef and I just said, it makes, oh, well, we use it when we're busy. And I'm like, you're not busy right now. Okay. You don't need to tie up those dollars. It's a business.
Yes. Guess what, guys? Time is our enemy. And it is beginning to come to this time where we have to say goodbye. So listen, what I'd like to do first is thank the guy who's paying the bills, Ed Flanagan, and the Era Group. Hey, over and over and over, if you're spending more than $100,000 on any vertical and not getting what you think you're supposed to be getting, call Ed Flanagan and the Era Group. Their experts will crawl through your invoices, crawl through your contracts, and make sure you're getting exactly what you pay for. And if you're not, they'll help you fix it. So Ed Flanagan, Era Group, and listen, this has been an eye opener for me, guys. I finally discovered that not only does Stephen have to be an expert chef, but now he has to become a general contractor and to figure out what tools to use, what people to use, what to use where. So that just adds another job on your back. Thank God you're a strong guy, Stephen. But why don't we go around the room and guys, give that last little bit of tidbit of information, something that the people could remember. Charles, why don't you start?
Manage your food and beverage operation like the money and the resources are your own, and don't take anything for granted just because you've done it before. They've done it this way for some period of time. It's probably long past the time you should have looked at it.
Yes. Stephen?
I would say one of the GMs I used to work with, he came from Invited, and one of their famous lines is, "You're trying to turn pigeons into eagles, or you're trying to make eagles out of pigeons." So that always resonated with me. But I think in the club world, there is a lot more downtime than in the public sector. So
Right.
there is where I see not enough chefs really maximizing the time and turning those pigeons into eagles, because you do have downtime. It takes 4 hours to complete 18 holes. There is a lot of downtime where people are not scheduling their kitchen guys with upward mobility and training. So that's what I want every chef to really focus on.
Okay, thank you. Guy?
I agree with both Stephen and Charles, very much so. But I also think that culinarians need to start to learn and understand the business side of the business. They need to improve their financial literacy. They need to understand that EBITDA is really an estimate or a perspective, that cash flow is what really is the essence of the real outcome. And they need to understand that you always have to be working on your foundation and making sure that foundation is absolutely solid. Because without a solid foundation, doesn't matter what you do above it, you're going to bleed pennies. And while it's a penny, 365 pennies is much more money than 1 penny. And when you take that times multiples of people and everything, it grows exponentially very quickly. So please control the foundation and learn to understand the interface of finance to the operation. Okay. And that goes for finance people too, to learn to become familiar with the art.
We don't have enough time to get into that one.
Exactly.
That's another 4 shows. Fred?
Yeah, I have a little different take on this. I think coaches coach, managers manage, and players on the field play. And I don't think these two skill sets are the same skill set. I think the great artists and the great chefs are not necessarily good business people, but they sure as hell better surround themselves with people that do understand the business side. So I think it's more up to a chef to say, hey, this is not my thing, I need help. and to bring in help to make this thing work.
Very
it's-
well said.
Maybe it's time we we start looking back to the education, the culinary education. And if general contracting is not part of that education, it seems you're doomed to fail eventually. So,
Yeah, but it's no more than you'd ask a great artist, Da Vinci, Van Gogh, whatever, it's a different skill set.
yeah,
It's not the
a
same.
Well,
Look, Joe Baum knew that he needed finance people around him. Joe was one of these guys with visions, but Joe needed finance to rein him in so that the business actually could survive and thrive.
Why
You
you
have
had
to
Dennis
know- you have to
Sweeney
know
for
your
all those years.
That's right. And Mike Whiteman, you really need
Yeah.
to understand your strengths and weaknesses and be open and say, look, that's not my skill set. Bring somebody in that can help me with this.
back
There's
to
nothing wrong with
ego.
it.
Back to ego.
Yeah,
That's right.
You have to know what you don't know. And
That's right.
that is probably one of the most important things in business. It's probably one of the biggest reasons why entrepreneurs fail.
And I think it's what makes somebody like Stephen, who's on with us today, different and special and unique, is that somehow he's managed to capture the best of both.
That's right.
Yep. So, like it brings back to mind one of our past guests always touted, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And it's so simple, but it's really, really hard to follow. So, like I said, time is our enemy. And this has been a great show. We will be back next week, so I hope you tune in. And I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for being on the show and enlightening us on what we don't know. So listen, only two things left to say. Everybody, stay positive, test negative, and I'll see you next week. Bye now, guys.
take
Thank
care.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, Bellas. Thank you.
Thank you.